everyone, welcome back to week 2 of 2021. I am Johnny DeRolla. This is still the damage report. We're holding on, like America, just barely holding on to our system of government and our sanity. Today we've got a treat for you, especially those on Twitch. You know who we've got? We've got Mr. Deep Dive himself. Jordan Ewell joins us once again on the program. How's it going, Jordan?
It's going great. Thank you for having me, John.
Always glad to have you here. And I don't necessarily envy you your day because we're gonna dive into all of the news for this hour. And then there's a tiny little break-a-rooney. And then on Twitch, we're gonna have the latest episode of Deep Dive, which is gonna be starting in exactly 90 minutes. So if you're at Twitch, don't go anywhere. If you're watching on YouTube or the members app, head over to Twitch after this show and you can see Jordan Ewell doing what he does best. Who do you got joining you today? What are you gonna be talking about?
Today, Will Summer from the Daily Beast is going to be joining me. He was at the Capitol on Wednesday. So we're gonna do kind of like a TikTok. We're gonna walk through like what he saw that day, some of the more outlandish things, and give some like historical context. I mean, mostly relatively recent history, but you know, the rise of like right-wing social media networks, like Parler, like Telegram, how that fed into this hysteria we saw on Wednesday, the president stoking it. Just a straight through line between right-wing fringe extremists, white nationalists, and the violence perpetrated on the Capitol.
Jordan, I'm gonna need you to stop though, because look, talking about, yes, is it a clear through line? Yes. Is there clear causality? Yes. But talking about it is divisive and it might lead to future attacks. So I think we should continue to stick our head in the sand.
Yeah, of course. Show's over. Sorry, everybody.
Anyway, glad to have you here though. Glad to have all of you here as well. Wherever you're watching, please hit the like button, share the stream so the people know we're active. That's apparently a thing you have to have. My goal for today on the show is twofold. One, cover the news in a serious fashion, upholding the ethics of our show and our network. Two is to get more simultaneous viewers on Twitch than that Spanish streamer who passed 2.5 million. I think we can do it, okay? But you're gonna have to like call your friends, call your neighbors, let them know we're live. Anyway, did you see that, Jordan? That's crazy.
Yeah, but I think it speaks to the power of Twitch and like independent broadcasting. And like it certainly is a great roadmap and like look ahead for networks like TYT. But yeah, he had 750 some concurrents last, like at one point I saw. I mean, you're right behind him, John. But that's really cool, and that rivals. You know, mostly that demographic was 22, 24 to 55, right? That is like the core demographic that cable wants. And for comparison, Chris Hayes or an 8 PM, 9 PM hour, excluding Matt out because she does higher ratings, but that's like about what Chris Hayes gets from that same demographic for his hour on MSNBC. So great, great things to come, I'm sure, for streaming independent broadcasters. So I thought I was really encouraged by that.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome. I don't know that streamer. I've never watched his content, but I saw it was on Kotaku. I saw something about it. It was like one screenshot of him freaking out. I was just thinking, yeah, that's gotta be nice. And any streamer, whether on Twitch or on YouTube, who has great success and doesn't occasionally dabble in white supremacy and Nazism, that's a good thing. Let's get more of that.
Absolutely.
No gamer moments, more gamer moments. Anyway, okay, with that, lot that we're gonna be talking about, you're gonna be talking too. You know what we should do? We should talk to each other. So if you send us comments, tweets, super chats, and things like that, we're gonna be responding to those. But with that, why don't we launch into this thing? Donald Trump has emerged from hiding. It's been like almost the longest gap of no live sighting of the president for some time. He's headed to the Alamo. Not the Alamo, but Alamo in Texas. And I'm sure that everything that'll happen there is just gonna be great. But anyway, he did answer a few questions and we're gonna show you a few videos. So the first has to do with his response to being booted off of Twitter. Here's what he had to say.
But I think big tech has made a terrible mistake and very, very bad for our country. And that's leading others to do the same thing. And it causes a lot of problems and a lot of danger. Big mistake, they shouldn't be doing it. But there's always a counter move when they do that. I've never seen such anger as I see right now, and that's a terrible thing. Terrible thing. And you have to always avoid violence. And we have tremendous support. We have support probably like nobody's ever seen before. always have to avoid violence.
I mean, Jordan, he did say he doesn't want violence in the midst of that's just a threat. That's all that is a big, massive, giant, terrible threat. What did you make of that?
Yeah, exactly. It was, you could call it gaslighting, you can call it manipulative behavior, but in the end, he is specifically calling for more protests, more pushback, and in the end, more violence. I mean, we heard reports from multiple sources that the day of, he was gleefully watching coverage, like he was enthralled by it. He made no effort to reach out to Pence or any of his even allies in the Republican Party who were trapped in the Capitol that day. He didn't really care. He's not moved by this. At the end of the day, he doesn't want to concede. He doesn't want to admit that he lost. He doesn't want the transfer of power to continue. He's still making, like you saw yesterday in the report about his call with McCarthy that Axios reported later in the day. He's still in denial about the results. At which point McCarthy kind of yelled at him. It's like, it's over. Like the election is over. You need to let it go. But he has to say that. I mean, he's aware enough that he can't go out and say, yeah, the violence is good. Like he's not that stupid, but he doesn't certainly mean it.
Yeah, that video is amazing, and the report that you were talking about with his talk with Kevin McCarthy, which also included that he said it was Antifa that did it. Wait, so then in that case, is Antifa the ones that you love and are very, very special people? Because that's what you were saying to the people after the attack. So are you pro Antifa? Oh my God, is the Antifa coming from inside of the White House? None of it makes any sense. But thankfully, he's got one thing going for him. It's that none of his followers are going to engage with anything that he says on a critical level, trying to make sense of it. Trying to make sense of that quote, which is they did a very, very bad thing. It's terrible and awful, but then there's always a counterstroke, massive anger, and it's a terrible thing to say. Wait, but you said that was bad, so why is the counterstroke to it bad? But you don't want violence, but we've got a lot of support. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying we have massive support, and maybe watch out if you ban me from Twitter. That's all I'm saying. And this is gonna come as a shock to Dana Bash, who gave him credit for his new tone just a few days ago. What happened to the tone? Why doesn't a tone ever last more than like 72 hours? And why don't any of the people who say that he has a new tone ever learn for more than 72 hours that that's not actually true? It's just so frustrating to go through this cycle. This is like the millionth revolution of this sort of thing that we've been through. Anyway, why don't we move on to other matters? One of the topics in DC is impeachment. Democrats are apparently expecting that tomorrow they're gonna have a vote on impeachment. Trump has a warning for the Democrats if they go forward with that.
On the southern border, as far as this is concerned, we want no violence, never violence. We want absolutely no violence. And on the impeachment, it's really a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in the history of politics. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. This impeachment is causing tremendous anger, and you're doing it, and it's really a terrible thing that they're doing. For Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to continue on this path, I think it's causing tremendous danger to our country, and it's causing tremendous anger. I want no violence. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that like on his way out, they're like, Mr. President, please just say I want no violence, because he's reiterating it in multiple instances. Like with every question, he's just forcing it in there. But before that, his answer very clearly said like, this is going to lead to backlash. Well, who would be inciting that backlash? It's Republicans, it's Republican officials, it's conservative thought leaders, it's conservative pundits from across the board, from members of Congress to Trump, his allies, his family, to Fox hosts. They're all like in lockstep on this same line, that any punishment, any retribution, any pushback or blowback from what happened on Wednesday will lead to more violence. They're not saying that they condemn that violence, that they don't want that to happen. They're saying it's inevitable, it's going to happen, which is a tacit encouragement of this violence. They know this is going to happen. We saw a report from Huffington Post last night that Matt Fuller published. There are multiple instances that federal officials and local officials are monitoring, and they're very worried about threats of violence on the inauguration. On top of the reports that we saw that all 50 states could see their state capitals under threat of armed protests. They know this is looming, and they are refusing to condemn it. They're refusing to discourage participation. They're saying, if you continue to ban Trump or ban Republicans or impeach him or punish him, that's the result. They're throwing their hands up while they know what's happening.
Yeah, at least they're consistent though. I mean, every one of these Republicans on 9/12 was like, hey, that was rough and all, but let's not do anything. It might cause more anger. None of them actually think that way. Yeah, the idea that there should be no consequences. They are far more, again, I thought facts don't care about your feelings. The Republicans only care about feelings, the feelings of the terrorists. They really want to make sure that the terrorists don't get offended and more angry. And you know what, I apologize to the director. Can we jump ahead to the third video? Because Trump is not the only person making this argument that if you have any consequences for me whatsoever, there's going to be violence. Fox and Friends was, actually, let's move to the last video. Last video, Fox and Friends on impeachment, here we go.
Believe that America could be more effective and has been ineffective because we've been at each other's throats. What could be more disenchanting?
They don't want him to run again. They don't want him to run again.
They don't want him to run again, and that's fine. But you don't understand, too, there's a lot of people that want him to, number one, continue to be a force in the Republican Party, believe a lot what he believes. He has 75 million supporters. So if you have an overarching sense that I got to bring the country together because we see what's happening around this country, how 50 state houses are being threatened on Inauguration Day, this is the last thing you want to do. It astounds me that now Chuck Schumer, guys, is exploring a possible workaround using the authority granted to 2 senators back in 2004 to reconvene the Senate in times of emergency. I assume this, and have a quick impeachment vote. Fantastic idea. Mitch McConnell has to sign off on it, but it would be as dumb as Nancy Pelosi hopping on 60 Minutes last night and saying the president's an imminent threat and he has to be derailed.
Okay, so they're agreed too. You're just, come on, don't give him any consequences for all that he's done and everything. Just like that'll make people angry. And can I mention one of the pettiest things? This is so stupid, but Trump got 74.223 million. What insane person rounds that up to 75? That's 74 million if you're doing rounding. And by the way, Joe Biden got 81.283, which I'm gonna round up to 100 million votes. That's 7 million more, that's 10% more. So should we not be worried about angering those people? You guys have been for months now hosting conspiracy theorists saying that the election needs to be overturned. You're not worried about those 81.228 million people that you're potentially disenfranchising. It's just all so fake. But this is Trump. It's also right-wing media.
Oh, it's absolutely right-wing media. There's a supercut that TYT has shown a lot that I produced last year of rhetoric. 2 years ago now. This is how long they've wanted it, but they've been specifically calling for and suggesting that divisions in this country, that the right and white nationalists and Trump and his cadre of supporters and enablers have been fanning the flames of. They say that's going to lead to a civil war, and this is the term that they continue to trot out. And now look at Brian Kilmeade's defense. Look, hey, this is bad, but actually, I don't know if he explicitly said it was bad, but he said there's a lot of people that want Trump to be a force in the Republican Party for a long time. Who cares? Who cares? That should not matter at all. And I'd like to think that if I was in a situation where my president of my party that I supported incited a violent, murderous riot at the Capitol, I'd like to think that he probably should not be in a position of power over everybody in the country. He should not be the most powerful person in the world. So it's blind partisanship. They will never risk severing ties with them because at the end of the day, like he said, they want him to be a force in the Republican Party because that just means more for them. More TV appearances, more book deals, more fancy dinners, more contracting gigs, consulting, whatever he ends up doing, there might be a piece of the pie in it for them. So they're not going to criticize him. So it's their personal greed and this capitalist utopia that they've hoodwinked themselves into believing is really the best form of society that leads to a result like this, where a murderous rampage at the Capitol still isn't enough.
Yeah.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, "You must unlearn what you have learned." And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Jesus. And I don't think there's, I mean, sure, they're going to impeach him or whatever, they got the votes, but I don't think there's going to be anything beyond that. It's going to be the same thing. Senate's not going to do anything. I don't even see why he's so worried about it. Like, sure, he can go down as the only president in American history who's been impeached twice. I guess that's cool. He wants to be historic. You're going to be number one when it comes to that. Anyway, let's get that last video from the A block ready and let's roll into that. Trump had to release that video, I think it was on Friday, assuring everyone that he's not in favor of violence and he's going to support, the peaceful transition of power. And he seemed to have done that under duress, apparently being told that he was being investigated for his involvement in the events of last Wednesday. And some people, as we've been alluding to, were very excited about his new tone and how it's going to be super serious now. And you definitely don't need to impeach him or anything like that. And yet, just a couple of days later, asked about his involvement in that event, here is how he described it.
What is your role in what happened at the Capitol? What is your personal responsibility?
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate. And if you look at what other people have said, politicians at a high level, about the riots during the summer, the horrible riots in Portland and Seattle and various other places.
We are coming out of this now because the president has started to, as he occasionally does, often does, veer away from the truth. His video that he taped on Wednesday after the riots were happening at the Capitol was not viewed widely as totally appropriate.
Yeah, I included that because I like that they cut away from it, because he was going to do what all the Republicans have done. Like, yeah, sure, they beat a cop to death and it's on video, but there was a riot 6 months ago that had nothing to do with Joe Biden or the Democrats or whatever, and in fact was almost as equally opposed to their lack of action on criminal justice reform as the Republicans. But anyway, we're gonna both sides that. So it's just so lazy and it's so repetitive. They've looked at it and everybody agrees it was a perfect speech. Where have we heard this before? It's not true. He knows it's not true. He knows that he's only responding to these questions because people had issues with it. It's just so rote and so lazy and so pathetic.
Yeah, there's we've seen this rhetorical device deployed throughout his entire time as president. Thankfully, it's coming to an end, but it took a long time for networks like MSNBC to cut away in moments like that, and for media outlets to finally be like, maybe we shouldn't just parrot everything he says, like adding fact check labels to chyrons on CNN, things like that. When I was at Media Matters, they conducted a study of which media outlets parroted baseless claims like that. Most, and The Hill was probably not surprisingly the one that did it the most. But now we've reached a point, and thankfully, through people like you and this show and TYT and Media Matters who have called on this kind of stuff, like quit repeating these blatant lies. Mm-hmm. We're now at a point where people are, way more hesitant at a time like this, when he's saying it was great and disassociating himself from the events on Wednesday, despite speaking to the rally, saying we are going to march to the Capitol and I will be with you. To what happened, he's now trying to avoid it, but thankfully we've reached a point through advocacy and people calling them out, saying stop airing out these blatant lies. So it took a long time, but finally we're here as he's about to leave office.
Yeah, and some have responded. You mentioned The Hill, their Twitter account. It's like a work of the devil. I don't understand. And by the way, it hasn't improved. They will literally just have not even the video. It'll be like a shot, so you can't even watch the whole video. It'll be a screenshot, and it'll just be Trump quote a lie. That's the whole tweet. That you had extra characters, you couldn't have put in something about that not being true, and everybody knows it's not true, and you definitely know that it's not true. And they tweet over and over. Like, why are you doing this? Who is making these tweets? How did you get into this business? But anyway, very frustrating. Yes, MSNBC and CNN are doing a little bit better of a job. You've definitely seen, especially since the election, a lot of the anchors on those channels have been freed up to be really critical of Trump and the Republicans in a way that they hadn't before. Maybe partially because they know that there's a change in not only the House is the Dems now, Biden's coming in, they're taking control of the Senate. They're allowed to be a little bit more critical of those who are going to be out of power very soon. So that sort of lines up well for them. But Trump saying that he had no part, well, you're saying on the one hand that we definitely shouldn't impeach you because of the anger and everything, and you said how you, I guess, sort of apologized on Friday with that video. But now you're saying you didn't do anything wrong, you didn't say anything wrong. So you're telling us that you have not learned your lesson. And obviously other Republicans haven't learned their lesson. So it seems like a lesson needs to be made. But at the same time, we're supposed to be worried about angering these many red hat wearing terrorists. So that's a fun position to be in for democracy. Anyway, why don't we move on to, you alluded to the reports of the potential attacks. So why don't we roll right on into that? There's an incredibly worrying article up on HuffPost right now by Matt Fuller, who has talked with a number of people who are briefed in a private call from late last night about a variety of different plots that are in theory moving forward for Inauguration Day. So on a private call, new leaders of the Capitol Police told House Democrats they were closely monitoring 3 separate plans that could pose serious threats to members of Congress as Washington prepares for the inauguration. The first is a demonstration billed as the largest armed protest ever to take place on American soil. Spoiler alert, that's the one they're least worried about potentially. Yeah, but they're worried about potentially tens of thousands of armed individuals heading to DC for that. I can't see why we'd be worried about that. The second is a protest in honor of Ashley Babbitt, the woman killed while trying to climb into the speaker's lobby during Wednesday's pro-Trump siege of the Capitol. Look, if you want to feel bad that she and others were killed during this, I understand that. I have a feeling that one could potentially go wrong as well. We've got details on the third though, and this is perhaps the worst. But Jordan, I know that you're familiar with this. Is this like a sort of knee-jerk part of me wonders to what, like how good is the intelligence on this? Is this just sort of convenient to put out there? I don't know, but after the events of last Wednesday, I don't think that we can really write off any possibility.
No, I think we should be prepared. DC is going into lockdown, I believe, like tomorrow or in a few days. And it's going to be an extended lockdown. And on the ground, there's encouragements for people: do not lease your place for Airbnb, do not put it on VRBO, anything like that, to help mitigate people coming into the city. That on top of probably restrictions on hotel and oversight and probably law enforcement presence at hotels. You might see attrition on both ends on how people would come and go into the city. So there are steps in place now, which is sad. It's a sad state of affairs, and this is something the president and Republicans across the board. This is an environment they have solely created. They have enriched this white nationalist presence and this sentiment in the country to this point. So that's concerning. The reports are horrifying. Look, as much as I might hate Republican politicians on the other side, I don't think we need to live in a country or should live in a country where people who are disgruntled just go up and shoot them. That's horrifying and a terrible way to live. It's chaotic and it's beneath us. We have shown we can at some point can govern collectively if we're responsible. But the way that big tech companies and media companies have radicalized people for profit the way profiteers have fanned these flames of hate in the country to the point where this is where we're at, just shows there are extenuating circumstances and it's not justified. And I'm deeply worried about people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, who embody a more progressive populist spirit in this country and are constantly under siege. We're constantly under threat. The people who tweet at Ilhan Omar relentlessly are unhinged. I'm deeply worried about her. So this environment that they are singularly creating, they're even fanned by members of Congress, like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert. It's extremely unsettling.
Yeah, 100%. We have to be very worried now, obviously, during this period, but always. Ilhan Omar, like the right hates all of them, but there's something about Ilhan Omar where, like, has there ever been a less offensive, just nice person? I was gonna say I don't understand it, but of course every single person watching this does understand why. But like, Ilhan Omar drives you insane? Seriously, how weak are you? Anyway, but we should be very worried about them going forward. I hope that they have an incredible amount of security because these are unhinged people. They have weapons. And now let's roll into the biggest demonstration. So this might be one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. Another demonstration would involve insurrectionists forming a perimeter around the Capitol, the White House, and the Supreme Court, and then blocking Democrats from entering the Capitol, perhaps even killing them, so that Republicans could take control of the government. Although we do have to be fair, in the full reporting, they're also planning to potentially kill Republicans who don't support Trump remaining as president. So they mostly want to kill the Democrats. They also want to kill some of the Republicans. Remember, these are the people that wanted to hang Mike Pence last week. So Democrats were told that the Capitol Police and the National Guard were preparing for potentially tens of thousands of armed protesters coming to Washington and were establishing rules of engagement for warfare. In general, the military and police don't plan to shoot anyone until one of the rioters fires, but there could be exceptions. Okay, so we have more, perhaps even scarier on a small level, but we are now 4 years into the Republicans having taken power in 2016. They had effectively unlimited power for 2 of those 4 years. They got tons of what they wanted done, wasted tons of billions of dollars on the border. They gave trillions of dollars to the wealthy. They picked away at the ACA. They've got a supermajority in the Supreme Court. And after years of them getting everything they want, we're now in a state where they tried to sack the Capitol, and a week later, we're worried about them performing effectively the Handmaid's Tale on Congress. We're worried about mass killings of our elected officials. That's where we're at. But we're the divisive and something BLM and all of that. And there was a guy in Portland or something. I don't know, but this is where we're at.
It's horrifying. And you would think that with all that we've learned and what we've seen, again, so much of this just takes video footage too. Like, we don't see action so often in police brutality cases until a video comes out. But here we have very clear demonstrable evidence on day one of thousands of people smashing windows, breaking doors, breaking down barricades, beating a cop to death. This is the Back the Blue crowd, beating him to death with an American flag. And still it's like, okay, well, if you ban Trump, this is what you want.
Yeah.
It's so unbelievably disingenuous. Like, they like it. At the end of the day, they like it because fear is a great motivator in politics. It's means through strength. It is everything that they kind of hold near and dear. It's this kind of hypermasculinity. It's this bravado, this sensationalistic politics. It works for them because at the end of the day, you might be a little too scared to stick your neck out if you're kind of the average Joe or an up and coming Democrat. You might be a little bit more hesitant to stand firm in what you believe, because this is on the other end. A militia, a ragtag militia who has been radicalized by Facebook memes wanting to kill you. I would understand why people wouldn't want to get into politics after that. So of course the Republicans want it because it makes it easier for them. You're on that team. You're not in jeopardy. You defend the president. You turn a blind eye to it. You're safe. That's it. It's ultimately cowardice.
Yeah, it's setting up not just a situation that can produce an act of terror, it is a pervasive sense of terror going forward. And using it to justify whatever you want, including not having consequences. The president can't do that. Terrorists might do something. I mean, is it impossible that when Joe Biden wants to pass some form of legislation, the same sort of argument isn't going to be out there? We'll see, we'll watch. And maybe these events won't even happen. There's a possibility that they won't. But from everything I've seen, the lesson that the right seems to have learned from this is not, oh no, we've gone too far. That doesn't seem to have been it. Honestly though, as bad as these planned attacks are, and God, I hope that the Capitol Police and the National Guard are finally taking it seriously and aren't oddly absent and oddly unprepared. There's also some concern about attacks coming from inside of elected government. One topic of discussion in this HuffPost piece was the need to put every member of Congress through a metal detector before the inauguration. A member on the call told HuffPost that there was an eyes wide open realization that Capitol Police needed to take precautions against all these members of Congress who were in league with the insurrectionists who love to carry their guns. One lawmaker told HuffPost, you can't just let them bypass security and walk right up to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris at inauguration. And look, is this potentially going too far? Potentially, maybe, but we have multiple new elected representatives who believe, based on forum threads on 4chan and 8chan, that Satanists control everything and they're eating babies. And these people, as much as they love Q, the only thing they love more is carrying guns everywhere. So are you 100% sure that they wouldn't do anything? These are insane people. Like as insane as anyone who was storming the Capitol, and they're allowed to go in there, and they want you to believe that they're allowed to take guns with them.
Yeah, so Lauren Boebert, who is the newly elected member of Congress, I believe from Colorado, has boldly proclaimed and bragged that she plans to carry her Glock around DC and the Capitol. Well, DC doesn't have a reciprocity agreement with anybody, so it's like already illegal. But she's doing it to flaunt it and create some reciprocity argument and probably get into Second Amendment like fights, right? So you already have someone,
or to just draw attention. She wants to get in trouble for it and then fundraise and all of that.
Totally. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, same type of person. I don't know if she carries her gun anywhere, but is a Q hysteric. Has lied about threats to her to kind of drum up support. But think about this. What disincentive is there to prevent any sort of action like the one you just mentioned? That any member of Congress who believes in QAnon or is a conspiracy theorist or a gun nut from taking, like, engaging in a violent way, whether it's hurting another member of Congress like an Ilhan Omar or killing somebody, what disincentive is there? They just valorized Kyle Rittenhouse. The right has turned him into a martyr. What disincentive is there for anybody on the right now to do this? I can't find one. There's a possibility where he might walk free. I mean, he's already out and living his life and as he normally would because he got out on bail. He murdered people because he wanted to defend a gas station or a car dealership in a state where he didn't even live. Purely driven by animus with the aid and support of police. And now he is a martyr on the right. If someone like that did that to a Democratic politician, they would be a god.
Good catch. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I know, like maybe like Francesca yesterday said that I was a cynic. Like part of me wants to say, well, oh my God, if they kill Democratic members of Congress, then surely, like Sean Hannity would have to step away from the brink. Tucker Carlson would have to realize they've gone too far. Ted Cruz would have to be an actual human for once. No. First of all, it ain't the first time that they've shot a Democratic politician, and nothing. It's because there is an easy out to everything. No, they didn't. That was Antifa. Like they have multiple right-wing streamers in the Capitol on video yelling, "It's us, it's the right." No, it ain't. Shut up, right-wingers. It's Antifa. That's all they would say. And Boebert's the one who makes the ads where she wants to portray herself like as if she's Rambo or something, showing her walking through the Capitol with a gun, even though Turns out that they faked it. She didn't actually have her gun. She's lying to her audience, but they don't mind. But remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the one who had those campaign ads with her and an assault rifle with Ilhan Omar and AOC. They're thousands of miles away from her, but for some reason, they're the ones that she has to have the assault rifle with. And she's gonna be walking through those hallways. Look into Marjorie Taylor Greene's eyes. She is out of it, gone, crazy. And she potentially could be carrying a gun around. By the way, here's a fun tweet from Kyle Griffin, just on MSNBC. During a briefing on security threats, House Democrats were reminded that the purchase of a bulletproof vest is a reimbursable expense. That's our country. That's our country. And by the way, I'm very glad that Jordan mentioned this. This isn't just a Capitol thing. That's what we've been focused on. That's what we're gonna focus on. But according to ABC News, the FBI has also received information that an unnamed right-wing extremist group is calling for storming federal, state, and local courthouses and other government buildings in the event that Trump is removed from office before his term expires on January 20th. We have in the Capitol, several Capitol police officers have been suspended, more than a dozen are under investigation over their actions related to the rally and the riot. And I read a couple of days ago that they're in advance of the inauguration, they're interviewing Secret Service members to try to weed out some who might be sympathetic to the ideology of those who attacked the Capitol. Because some of them are. Because police departments, the military has for a very long time had a white supremacist and neo-Nazi problem, and we've just pretended that it doesn't exist. And conveniently, when Trump got in, he disbanded the section that investigated right-wing domestic terrorist attacks. And what do you know? They're flourishing after that. This is all a gigantic nationwide mess. And we're being told that our concerns about this, that's the thing that's divisive and dangerous.
I don't know where we go from here. And I'm sorry to take this thing like in a more depressing bent, but like this, at some point we have to consider whether there is any coming back from this. Because there's going to be people who can get ahead by fanning these flames, by being a demagogue, by appealing to these people. Might doesn't make right, but it's a powerful force in politics. So you're going to have more Trumps at the state and local level. I mean, you saw the state legislators in this crowd streaming themselves, like West Virginia state legislator. There's a couple other people from around the country. They're already elected. And then you saw newly elected Republicans opening the door for them. Andy Biggs, a member of Congress, planning with them.
Yep.
We have to ask ourselves, and maybe the answer is no. Is this just what life is gonna be like? Or is America a failed state? And is this that we just have terminal rot infecting our politics and there is no turning back? It's tough to think about, but maybe that's the grim reality. It's because people have exploited a system for personal benefit to this end. Mm-hmm. I hope not, but I mean, we have to reckon with it.
I remember, I forget the name of the senator who lost re-election because of the controversy. It was a Republican, when he called someone macaca and then pretended he didn't know that it was supposed to be like a racial slur. And that was enough of a scandal that thankfully he lost re-election. Republicans want people who are out of their mind, not willing to tolerate people who are out of their mind. They want to be sure that these people are out of their mind from a rational person's point of view. They want to know that these people believe in Q and all of that and believe whatever conspiracy theory you want, whether it's about the pandemic, about the elections. They desperately want that. Like these state representatives who traveled there, they wasn't a faux pas. Like if their voters find out about this, it's going to help them. That's if you want to have like state level aspirations, eventually become a national celebrity. We have the squad. Why are they famous? They're famous because they seem to actually get what's wrong with the country and actually want to do something about it. And compared to other Democrats, that's bold. On the right, who are their celebrities? The craziest people. The Madison Cawthorns, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, and now Lauren Boebert. Again, I don't know. Maybe it is a depressing way that you have taken it, Jordan, but I also agree that all of the incentives are wholly wrong. And they're just going to follow the incentives. The media is going to follow the incentives. And if that means telling nothing but lies, they're going to do it. Whipping people into a frenzy so that they can get crowdfunding or whatever. And for the politicians, it's the same. It's a very, very scary place that we've gone into. And getting rid of Trump is helpful in some ways, but that doesn't get rid of the movement.
Yeah.
Okay. No, sorry, continue.
Oh, no, that's exactly it. I think that's what a lot of people haven't fully grasped. And so I'm glad you mentioned it. I mean, I don't want to hold us up, but yes, this energy is not going away after Trump. Like, and a lot of people just are thinking about inauguration and getting past that. But like, then what? They're not going to disband. They'll just go, and it's going to be a jockeying contest between Josh Hawley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Madison Cawthorn, those types of people, and to an extent Ted Cruz, who they get behind. So it's going to be a pissing contest to see who can be the most outlandish. Like they're going to try to be as bizarre and crazy as they can, speak to these populist inclinations, speak to these white nationalist inclinations. These are two separate, distinguishable things, and fan these flames for personal political gain. It's going to be extremely ugly. The demagoguery we're going to see over the next 2 to 4 years is going to completely transform how we see politics in this country, because it's already bad. Now you're going to have multiple people trying to recreate the Trump method at multiple different levels, with national spotlights. It's not going to be a singular figure that they can point to. It's going to be the new normal in the Republican Party.
And there's just nothing like it on, I'll say a left. I mean, basically with the Democratic Party, but like in the Democratic primary, they were sort of competing with each other for the most part, many of them, to pretend that they're more left. Meaning that they're going to do something about healthcare, maybe climate change or something like that. Most of them didn't really mean it. That was what they were competing on. Like the last primary on the Republican side was crazy. This one, I don't think anyone is going to be ready for how they're, oh my God. We reported live on the show yesterday that the first representative who had been sort of cloistered during the attack on Wednesday had been stricken with COVID. We've got some updates on that. We also have updates on others, because now more people in the Democratic caucus have apparently been exposed to and infected by COVID, including Representative Pramila Jayapal, who tweeted, "I just received a positive COVID-19 test result after being locked down in a secured room at the Capitol, where several Republicans not only cruelly refused to wear a mask, but recklessly mocked colleagues and staff who offered them one." Now we have others on this, but just in case you haven't seen this, we actually have video of that happening in that room, and here it is. So, group of Republicans who are like joking and smiling. No, I don't want that. So 2 things. 1, that they think it's funny that they're being offered a mask. 2, that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's smiling and having a good time. Yeah, the mask thing is happening. What else is happening right then? They had to be ushered to a secure location because a mob has broken into the building. And she feels like perfectly comfortable. Maybe because she knows she's not in any danger whatsoever. That crowd would absolutely love her. They agree with her on virtually everything. But there, she and other Republicans aren't wearing masks, and now multiple, and we'll have details on other representatives who've gotten it. Multiple now have COVID and hypothetically could suffer incredible damage to their health or possibly death. Jordan, I saw that you were tweeting about this earlier today, actually.
Yeah, I have to point out Mark Wayne Mullen saying, sorry to get political here, in the Capitol building, like the heart of politics. It's just the irony couldn't be lost on anybody. Also in that group, I believe was Andy Biggs, who has been revealed to have worked with the Stop the Steal organizers, but ultimately right-wing provocateurs who planned this. So he was like in on this effort that then forced them into this room, and there's just this nonchalantly, oh no, I don't want this mask. I mean, it's a who's who of the worst characters in Congress all sitting together, mocking what ultimately ended up and probably will end up being a super spreader event in that room, because we're just now starting to get test results back. It's just now passing the incubation period for people. It's going to get worse. If already 3 people have it in that room, more certainly have it.
Yeah, and they don't care. Think about that. These are their colleagues. She just got into Congress. A woman who, I mean, I wouldn't trust her to work like the front counter at something. She got into Congress, and she doesn't care if she exposes her new colleagues to a deadly pathogen. She believes that there is evil in the world, and that evil is in the form of Democrats and people in Hollywood who are Satanists who rape and kill children. And she is casually like, I don't care if I get you sick and you die, or if like maybe like your grandma dies as a result of this. But she knows what evil is. She knows what evil is. And so Pramila Jayapal has it. Pramila Jayapal, by the way, I'm gonna jump ahead just a little bit, is now, she tweeted, any member who refuses to wear a mask should be fully held accountable for endangering our lives because of this selfish idiocy. I'm calling for every single member who refuses to wear a mask in the Capitol to be fined and removed from the floor by the sergeant at arms. So she has it. By the way, the representative who had it yesterday is Watson Coleman. We also have Brad Schneider. Ayanna Pressley, by the way, had tweeted that as soon as she realized that the anti-maskers and people who largely philosophically agree with the people who were attacking the Capitol were in that room, she left because she didn't feel safe in there. But why would she? I mean, the building has been breached by people who want to hunt down and kill these representatives. And that room is filled with people who don't mind if they accidentally kill those people. The building was breached by people who wanted to stop the vote and give the election to Trump even though he lost. That room was filled by representatives who were trying to do that very thing. And as soon as the building had been cleared, they resumed doing that and voting to disenfranchise tens of millions of Democratic voters. Like, we're supposed to believe that these are different groups, but their goals seem perfectly in lockstep. Their rhetoric seems perfectly in lockstep.
Yeah, I mean, would a fine prevent it though? And say in so many instances, fines are just safeguards for rich people to commit crimes. And like we've talked about in other aspects earlier on this show, would that then just turn them into martyrs? Oh, I am taking a stand for freedom. I'm refusing to let the Democrats tell me what I can do with my body. They would just turn it into a bodily autonomy thing. This bad faith, low rent argument. Crowdfund off it. Help Marjorie Taylor Greene pay her mask fees. It's just like, you can't deal with these people. They're irrational. And again, just like, God, is there any coming back from this? Because it's just like dealing with a toddler. You're dealing with an entire political party of violent toddlers.
It's just, we're trying to have a society here. Like, and not to be stupid and dumb about it, but we're trying to have a society.
Yeah.
Like, one of the foundational elements of a society is not casually killing the people around you. Like, I don't, again, I guess it's the theme of today. I don't know what you're supposed to do when the country is increasingly filled with people who are completely out of their mind and want blood, and also casually don't mind if they kill people on their path to killing people. I don't know what we're supposed to do. Like, I hope that all of these representatives they make it through this with very mild cases, that they don't expose members of their family. There's a possibility that a Democratic member of Congress could die as a result of these completely irresponsible actions. And again, just to get out in front of it, no accountability will be had. If Pramila Jayapal, God forbid, died as a result of this, Marjorie Taylor Greene, what do you think, she'd apologize? And Tucker Carlson would suddenly start taking it seriously? No, none of them would care. None of them would care. It would just be a new seat that they could compete for and maybe get a little bit more political power. That is the only thing they would care. They'd be excited, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that you had actually requested earlier today, so we got it for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Around the country, we're just hoping for any consequences whatsoever for the Republican politicians who have aided and abetted and agreed with and now apologized for those who attacked the Capitol. And hey, we kind of sort of have it. Some big companies are briefly pausing donations to politicians. So these companies fall into three broad categories. Those going after specific Republican lawmakers who voted against the certification of the presidential election, those going after objectors in general, and those withholding all contributions for now, regardless of political party and whether a lawmaker participated in the effort. I'm gonna say for that third group, you deserve negative credit. For the rest of you, very little credit. But to give it really fast, and honestly, we have a lot of details, and our producers did a great job putting it together. But like, I viscerally don't care about the details about what these companies are doing, but thank you so much for doing the production. Morgan Stanley is suspending all PAC contributions of members of Congress who didn't vote to certify the results. Dow is suspending all PAC contributions to any member who voted to object to the certification. It'll last for one election cycle, 2 years for representatives and up to 6 years for senators. AT&T did something. Hallmark is there. Hallmark seems okay generally, I don't know. Coca-Cola said in a statement that it would also suspend political giving. These events will long be remembered and will factor into our political contribution decisions. Facebook, no, I'm not even reading the graphic. Shut up, Facebook, I don't care. I don't care what you did, you get zero credit. In fact, can we delete that graphic? I don't want it to be able to be read. But anyway, Jordan, how much credit do they deserve? What do you think?
None. This is a cynical PR ploy by people who had no problems any step of the way. They had no problems with archaic immigration policies, family separation. They have no qualms about jingoistic foreign policy or militaristic crusades around the world. They don't care about Republican efforts to deprive people of bodily autonomy and making reproductive choices. They don't care. In fact, many of them don't want you to have health care. They did want tax cuts and they got that. And they had no problem with that. But now, when there's blood on someone's hands, oh, hey, whoa, whoops, how would we know? Despite this being the clear trajectory we were on to any rational observer. At the end of the day, they only care about profit. And there's a couple of different distinctions here. Some of them are making pauses for 6 months. What does 6 months get us to? The summer recess. When they come back from summer recess, they are in midterm. So they're delaying PAC contributions when nobody is campaigning. They aren't pledging to stop lobbying, and they haven't made any concessions or comments on where money would be going regarding C4s. So they're still gonna pump money into super PACs, which you cannot then trace. But they're just not gonna give easily traceable and very small quantities, limited by law, several thousand, I think is the cap, to a PAC, a candidate's PAC, which is already becoming antiquated for a couple different reasons. The populist rhetoric in the country has successfully moved people away from direct campaign contributions. Obviously Cenk and TYT has been at the forefront of that issue for years, but now the right is starting to adopt it as well. It's limited by the tax code, so you can't really give much. You could give like, I think 5,000 or something like that to a PAC. Unlimited amounts of money to a super PAC, untraceable. So they could just very easily flood super PACs with millions of dollars to get the same result, maybe even more successful, because then those PACs will run ads in support of these candidates. So it is a purely cynical PR play. They're gonna fund millions and millions of dollars into right-wing PACs or super PACs and C4s. Just it is all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and you're 100% right for all of those reasons. But even if all of that wasn't true, they are limiting this donations when we are exactly as far from an election as you can ever possibly be in America. Like, we just had the special elections. Like, you don't get farther. And who thinks in 6 months they aren't all gonna go back to, like, sure, do the representatives want money now? Sure. But they're gonna want a hell of a lot more of it in 6 months and a year and a half, I can tell you that. And I have a feeling Hallmark, who I guess gives, why is Hallmark involved in any of this? We all know, but corporate tax and all that. But they're gonna be giving it again, which is why, like, I saw a comment on the Twitch from Pickerbell Pixie, who is an awesome person, and says, this is still good because corporate money needs to get into politics. Pickerbell Pixie is obviously right in the overall goal, but I would say Jordan is right in that this is not what this is doing. This has, like, if you had a book on this, it would be filed in the library under corporate finance, I guess. But that is exactly as much as it has to do with their actual involvement in financing political campaigns. This is the easiest thing by far for them to get rid of, and it generates a little bit of positive buzz and everything, but that's basically it. It's basically it. How about this? if you're worried, if you're a corporation, a CEO, and you're worried that you're gonna donate to a politician who's gonna support an insurrection, I have an easy out for you. Get your money out of politics entirely. Don't lobby, don't donate anything. Just make your stupid cards and stuff. Do your business stuff. We'll take care of the politics. You go make donuts. I don't know what you do. But you shouldn't be donating, you shouldn't be running ads, you shouldn't be donating to super PACs and all of that. Just get your money out of politics permanently, and you can avoid all the insurrections.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, really fast, Pinkerbell Pixie says, yeah, I changed my mind after Jordan ranted a bit. But your goal is laudable.
That's great. Yeah, it's just so cynical, and like they've done more to undermine democracy here and around the world. That just through corporate greed and profiteering. So this idea that they protect democracy. Do you want to talk about Facebook for a second? Do we have time? Because that's hilarious. Because I went on last night on Facebook to see if I could find information about protests on the 20th, and yeah, absolutely. You're still finding conspiracy theory and fringe rhetoric in Facebook groups. So it's hilarious that they're like trying to save face when they they had no problem taking millions and millions of dollars from the Trump campaign and Republican politicians in ad funding over the course of the election, but now they're going to pause direct very, very small contributions to campaign or candidate PACs for however long. It's so unbelievably funny because it's a cynical PR play.
Yeah. Or is Mark Zuckerberg the hero we need?
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
he's gonna save us all.
Yeah. Okay. Super fast. I want to roll through this last topic because I could in theory save it for tomorrow, but I really want to know what Jordan thinks about this. So really fast, let's jump into the F block. I see. By the way, people think that I always skip to the E block. I'm seeing that in the chat now. I don't think that that's true. Anyway, a little bit of bad news for Fox News. According to Justin Baragona, both CNN and MSNBC beat Fox News across the board in ratings on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Prior to that, according to Nielsen, the last time Fox News lost to both networks in total viewers was over 20 years ago on 9/24/2000. On Friday, all of Fox's primetime programs finished third in total viewers and the demo. That includes Tucker Carlson, which drew 3.36 million viewers and 500. I don't really care. Chris Hayes had looking like 500,000 more. Anderson Cooper, way more popular than Tucker Carlson these days, apparently. Anyway, generally do care all about ratings. I think it's incredibly weird that the president talks about it as much as he does. But Fox losing to both of those networks, it hasn't been for decades. And we know that they have been bleeding some support as a result of what happened in November and them not, going as vociferously on the election fraud stuff as places like OAN and Newsmax. Jordan Ewell, down goes Fox News. Are they done? Are they bleeding out?
Oh, I wish. No, I think this was just an activation of people who had probably just tuned out for a while, wanting to know what happened rather than like moving from Fox and going somewhere else. I think honestly, if anything, this reflects people deliberately shutting the TV off and sticking their head in the sand on Fox's end. They didn't want to acknowledge it. So I think that it's a combination of two things. It's people who hear about this tragic incident. I mean, we saw on Deep Dive, we were like it was live. So we were talking about it and we saw like a 200% increase in viewership, and just people wanted to know what was happening. So they went where they felt comfortable. And for MSNBC, that meant people wanting to get tuned in. I think on Fox's end, it was people wanting to tune out. It's just cognitive dissonance. They can't reconcile these two things. That they're the ultimate do-gooders. They're the patriots. BLM and Antifa are the problems. But here they are confronted with Trump flags and shattered windows and dead bodies laying in the Capitol. So they couldn't handle it. I think they just turned off the TV temporarily.
There's one alternate theory. This is from Kurt Bergler, who says, well, John, they did have quite a few viewers busy doing other things those nights. That's true. Some of them were in DC, I guess. Some of them were writing.
They were home.
Now, in terms of where Fox is going, two little bits of news that I've seen in different articles from Media Matters I just found to be interesting. So one is very recent. This is from just yesterday, I think. Suzanne Scott, Fox News CEO, revealed in a Monday statement that the network was shaking up its programming in the new year. The biggest move is that Fox News Primetime, a new program featuring a rotating cast of opinion hosts, is taking over the 7 p.m. Eastern time slot previously held by The Story, a news side program. So opinion eats one more hour into the news side. By the way, the news side, there was a hell of a lot of conspiracy theorizing on there. But now they're just taking another hour away from it.
Yeah, and that feeds into Tucker's block. That's interesting. I had not seen that, but yeah, the story, Martha McCallum was kind of like their safeguard and their firewall for the news division, and something that they pointed to in ad pitches and upfronts and that kind of stuff. So it just shows that they're going to continue to radicalize their audience, and that's an even smoother glide ramp. Because right before that is Brett Baer. So then he's sandwiched between the 5 and now this. So their only real news representation is just going to be Brett Baer, who is easily susceptible to some of these right-wing bad faith campaigns, playing the refs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whether or not he survives next year, and it just becomes like a 5 o'clock to midnight block of opinion and conspiracies remains to be seen. I mean, that's kind of the path they're on. If there's an audience for it and there's a demand for it and profit for it, why wouldn't they? They'll just put him in the morning. Maybe.
I think in a year, Brett Baer is going to be gone. It's just going to be an hour of Alex Jones bouncing off of like padded walls and ranting about lizards. That's going to be your 5 p.m. hour. By the way, going forward, reminder, this is news from a couple of months ago that I remembered. Tucker Carlson is becoming Fox's news side assignment editor. So that's fun. Already, by the way, I don't watch Fox in the morning, but you know what they do a lot of times in the morning? They play clips from Tucker Carlson and talk about them on the news shows in the morning. So it's just Tucker, front to back, just Tucker. Anyway,
that's dangerous. But I mean,
for Fox.
Yeah, that's another conversation for another day.
Anyway, I would love to keep going, but I know that you have to prep for your show because Deep Dive is coming up in just 25 minutes. What can they expect on Twitch in less than a half hour?
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, come over to Twitch on TYT. We're going to talk to Will Sommer of the Daily Beast. He was at the Capitol on Wednesday, so he'll give us kind of a play-by-play of what he saw, what he heard, his reporting, how we got to this point, the fringe networks that fueled this effort, the conspiracies that led into this, and the aftermath, and what he's hearing now, looking ahead to inauguration. So it should be a good conversation. If you're familiar with Will or his work, you know, he kind of keeps a humorous bent to it because he's just like so like consistently confused and blown away by how outlandish it continues to get. So very funny guy, love him. I'm really excited for the conversation. So yeah, join us on Twitch.
Awesome, sounds good. And Jordan, thank you as always. Have a good one.
John.
Since the events of last Wednesday, I have spoken quite a bit about it, but the entire time I have been waiting here at the Damage Report to speak to one individual, waiting for his return to the show, the Jacob Borowski Professor of Philosophy at Yale University and author of How Fascism Works. Jason Stanley returns to the show. Jason, how you doing?
Well, I would wish I could say good, but here it is. So,
yeah. I'm assuming busy. I assume you've been quite busy for the last week.
Unfortunately, I wish I was not busy. But
well, you wrote the book on how fascism works, and over the last 2 years, I actually rewatched our interviews. We've spoken 3 or 4 times, and now watching what you had said you expected to happen after the events of last week, it really does feel like we were sort of always moving to this point. But before we launch into all of it, I'm curious, as Wednesday was developing, what were you thinking as it was going on?
I'd been expecting it. So, I mean, when you look at the literature on when leaders call for political violence against their opponents, what you see is there's always a years-long lag between when political rhetoric becomes violent, when you start calling your political opponents traitors, when you start calling for them to be violently punished, attacked, when you label them as dangers to the future of your nation. There's always a lag of years between that and mass violence. So how long that lag differs from country to country. I have a friend who survived the Rwandan genocide, not to compare what's going on to that, but just the political violence aspect. And I spoke to her once and she said, well, they were talking about Tutsis as snakes and cockroaches, but nothing was happening. So we had nothing happening here. I mean, we had a lot happening, but we didn't have this mass political violence happening. But when the president of the United States is calling for open rebellion, at some point, someone's gonna act. So when I saw that crowd in front of the White House, and I was watching the entire time with my children, as it happens, my young children, and I was explaining to them, this is what happens when you call your opponents traitors, you call for revolution. This is what happens, and you're watching a lesson in history.
I'm curious about that lag that you're talking about, and I'm wondering, does it work in the opposite direction? Because he, since that event, has only appeared publicly literally the morning that we're recording this. And he did say multiple times, I want no violence, there can't be any violence. He did threaten social media companies and he threatened congressional leaders with retribution if they impeach him. But he did say several times he doesn't want any violence. So if you're out there as one of his followers and he's saying that, how do you interpret that message, assuming you get it?
So the philosopher of language, Jennifer Saul, has a concept that she calls fig leaf. And she says that she came up thinking about Donald Trump's rhetoric. And she coined it when he made the comment when he first ran for office and said Mexicans are gang members, they're rapists, and I assume some are good people. And she said what Donald Trump does is he says something and then he takes it back at the end, so that you can then not, so then he can not be blamed for the things he clearly said. So Donald Trump today said that everything he said was completely appropriate. What is it that he said? He said it's they're stealing the election. You can't be peaceful. You have to be, he said all sorts of things that can't be read in any other way than by calling for, like what we saw on January 6th. So it is part of his rhetorical tactics, as Jennifer Saul has shown, that he regularly does this. He regularly, at the end of doing that, says, okay, I'm not really saying that.
Yeah, oh geez. He also said, like the afternoon or night of the day, he said in a video to those people, I love you, you're very special people. It was quite sweet. It was like he was speaking to a lover of many years, but
he was
speaking to
his followers, his children. It's a leader. Donald Trump is an expert in mass politics. He's a very skilled mass political speaker. This is why it's not, though the Republican Party has figures. I mean, the Republican Party has a lot of figures who are now defending and standing up against that, to their credit. But it has some people like Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz, and Senator Hawley, Republican Party elites, who are trying to follow in President Trump's footsteps. But I don't know if they can do that kind of trick that you just said. I don't know if they have the same rhetorical skills to bond with their audiences.
So I think you're quite right to point out there are some in the Republican Party, including Mitch McConnell, said the election's over, Biden won, and all of that. But then at the same time, like they cleared out all of the people who attacked the Capitol, and then Hawley and Cruz went back in and they tried to pursue politically the same thing that those attackers had tried to pursue with violence. So you have this split. And at the same time, the Democrats are saying we now need to like make an example of Trump or stop him from exercising power in the future by impeaching him. And there are all these Republicans who are saying that would be divisive. Even people who've criticized Trump for being involved in Wednesday's thing are saying let's not impeach him though. And you had a tweet where you said it was post-Civil War calls for unity that led to Jim Crow. They're all calling for unity and no division right now. Tell me a little bit about that tweet and what you think might happen if Trump is allowed to just go off with no consequences.
So let's first begin by pointing out it's not just Trump. Senator Hawley and Senator Cruz, we're talking about two people who are the elite of the elite. I went to the State University of New York at Stony Brook, paid my own way through college. I'm a professor now, but Josh Hawley is a banker's son. He went to Stanford University and Yale Law School. He didn't go to state schools like I did. Ted Cruz went to Princeton. He's the runner-up of the national runner-up or was the top college debater. These are the elite of the elite. These are among those of us who have. These are people born on between third base and home, and so these are the elite's elite, and these elites have taken on this, so they know better. They obviously know better. So we're not talking Tommy Tuberville here, who thought the Second World War was a fight against socialism. We're talking about people born to the elite, groomed in the highest, best universities in the world. Now explicitly endorsing the idea that democracy is irrelevant. No election in which a Republican loses is valid. And so that's very disturbing, and that needs to be called out, and it's a disturbing development. And if we don't stop it and call it out and do something, then it's a social and political movement moving into the future. Let's look back at our America's past and see what happened in the Civil War. The Reconstruction was a period of around a decade when Black Americans in the South were able to vote and hold office. For people of my generation, we've seen, we remember first Black congressmen since Reconstruction, because during Reconstruction there were many Black congresspeople. So how did Reconstruction end? Reconstruction ended when in the mid-1870s, 1876, 1877, it was decided as part of a compromise that we want to unify the South and the North and get over the wounds of the Civil War, remove federal troops from the South, which was completely known would lead immediately to no more Black voting. And Black Americans in the South couldn't vote for 90 years. And that's because of the desire to unify the country. Who will suffer now from the desire to unify the country? We all will suffer. Democracy will suffer, because unifying without accountability means a strong signal, especially to the elites of our country, the Senator Hawleys and Senator Cruz, from the elite class, educated in the elite universities, to the elites that their behavior will go unpunished. So democracy will lose. And we saw this really, we're reaping, in my view, the consequences of President Obama's failure to do accountability in 2008 with a financial crisis and the Iraq war and the torture regime. The message then was, it doesn't matter what you do, what sort of violations you do. You can lie to the American people, you can cheat us out of money as the bankers did, and there are no consequences. And to have no consequences again, we'll have a social and political movement that will make Trumpism seem mild by comparison, is my worry.
Yeah, the issue with the philosophy of looking forward, not backwards, is sometimes someone's behind you. Sometimes a lot of someone's are behind you. Yeah. We're speaking with Jason Stanley, the author of How Fascism Works, and I want to turn to the future. Both the medium-term future, but I feel like we first have to address like the next 7 days or so. There are FBI reports about the possibility of mass attacks in DC at state houses, state courthouses, local courthouses. They don't know exactly where this might be, but they're talking about potentially tens of thousands of armed individuals heading to the Capitol to try to stop Democrats from making it into government buildings, killing them if necessary, killing Republicans who won't support Donald Trump. We saw just a week ago, the Capitol Police was woefully unprepared for the most like telegraphed event in recent American history. Do you expect that these protests will materialize? Do you think that the Capitol Police and the National Guard will be more prepared if they do? Based on what Trump is saying and what you're seeing, where do you see this going in the near future?
Okay, so no one can predict it. Actually, it's quite easy to predict that there was going to be some kind of mass right-wing political violence. But here's the situation that we find ourselves in. Trump, who I I don't underestimate Trump. I have a much higher opinion of him, of his tactical and strategic abilities than other people, which has guided me throughout this era. There's been no systematic attempt to study, to monitor the explosion among the far right in this country, and that I think has been deliberate. So Alex Vitale, the policing specialist, talked about how it's typical, given the given that we live in essentially a racist country, for police to overestimate the dangers in black protests or leftist protests, as those of us who participated in Occupy remember. They're not friendly police there, and underestimate the dangers in these kinds of protests. We've had years of not paying attention to the domestic threat from white terrorism and far right terrorism. Of course, not all of these people are white. There are plenty of black Proud Boys, but this kind of domestic far right terrorism. Now what we've got is we've got an enormous movement. We have an enormous movement. The people that attacked the Capitol were not just people living in the woods doing survivalist games and with their can openers. They came from all classes, all professions. They were doctors, lawyers, everything. This is a mass right-wing movement. And that's what happens when you have a political leader who foments conspiracy theories, says that liberals are out to bring world communism to your country, and all the other, and QAnon and these kinds of extreme conspiracy theories. So what we have is a mass right-wing, armed right-wing movement of all classes. It's not just survivalists. It's not just people, not just and we've seen this all over the world when far right militarized movements become mainstream. So that's what we face. So the question is, these are also people who are members of every branch of law enforcement. So the question is, so that's a long-term problem. How it shakes out in the next week, is anybody's guess. January 6th was hopefully something. I mean, I think there's a lot of sympathetic Trump supporters in every branch of law enforcement. And so, but the signal has to be sent to them that democracy is more important than anyone's allegiance. And they're not gonna get away with this. Trump's not gonna win. So if Trump's not gonna win, now's not the time to do your revolution. I have no doubt that no matter what happens, January 6th will be a rallying cry for this movement into the future, and maybe decades into the future. What will happen in the next 7 days? I hope enough people are saying there's going to be accountability, especially people who are sympathetic, if you're not doing your jobs.
Yeah, I hope so. And seeing in just a few years us go from Charlottesville to January 6th. I mean, God only, like, you project that forward and you don't necessarily like the path that it's taking. But finally, you've mentioned a number of different historic examples, generally that have gone very poorly for the non-fascists. Based on your research, do you have any advice hypothetically for the Biden administration or for Congress going forward? Anything that we can learn from the history of dealing with these movements to try to get us back to a place that's less fundamentally insane in so many different ways?
Yeah. Well, I think that as usual, I'll join the chorus of praising Stacey Abrams. I mean, if you look at what Stacey Abrams has done, what you've done, look at what black political organizers have done, and young people who've registered voters. I think there's going to be a social and political movement arising, a far right social political movement moving to the mainstream that's going to use the myth of a fraudulent election as a revenge narrative. We need anyone. We have many QAnon supporters in Congress, so we need to be explicit about that. So I think the more explicit and the more we face things and don't deny reality, the better we'll be able to deal with the reality we have. I think what we've seen is far too much minimization, both about how bad the already extant background situation was, I mean, Black Americans have been telling us since the 60s at least that the law enforcement is shot through with far-right white supremacists. So maybe we can take that seriously. And maybe we can have less minimization of the it can't happen here and these guys are clowns variety.
Yeah, that's all great advice going forward. And as you know, some of the Capitol Police are under investigation for their actions last week, and the Secret Service is being combed through for people sympathetic to this ideology. Yeah, I think there might have been something to that infiltration argument all along. Anyone watching this, the book is How Fascism Works: The Politics of Us and Them. As always, Jason, we appreciate you joining us and lending your expertise to the show.
Thank you so much.
Hello, members, and welcome to the weekly top 10 list. Obviously, coming about a day late. For this particular one, I wanted to make sure that I had props, and so I waited until later in the day on Monday. I recorded it at home, and you're seeing it now on Tuesday. Thank you for being level 2 and 3 members and getting access to the top 10 list. We appreciate the little bit of additional support that you give to the channel and to the network. It is very much appreciated, especially in these times, to keep us going. I wanted to do this list for a couple of different reasons. The top 10 board games of all time, sort of, because there's been a lot of requests for it. People asking me about board games on most of the shows, but also I wanted to make sure that our top 10 lists weren't exclusively political. You might have noticed we do a lot of political content, and so I'd like to branch out from time to time. This was one that Francesca would have been a good sport on and joined in, but I don't think her heart would have really been in it, and so I decided to do this one myself. And also, conveniently, that gives me a full 10 instead of just 5. So I'm going to be giving you my top 10. The overall sort of rules I've put for myself on this is I want these to not just be the games that I'm most interested in playing right now. I really do want it to be sort of a look back at the games I most enjoy. But that said, I do still have to want to play them. Like, if I liked playing it 10 years ago, but you couldn't get me to play it right now, it's probably not going to be on the list. And I also wanted to have a mix of games. And so this is what I've got on any particular day. The rankings could change, things could sneak into the top 10, but this is what it's looking like right now. And at number 10, to start off the list, I have a game that I haven't played in a while. This is probably the game that it's the longest gap since I last played it. It is the X-Wing miniatures game. I have the rule book as a prop because my actual container that I have them in is massive and I'd hurt my back lifting it. But if you're familiar with this game, it's a tabletop miniatures strategy game where you have little miniature representations of the spaceships from the Star Wars universe, both from the movies, but also the extended universe out to basically everything you can imagine, comic books, and stuff like that. And you and one other person, or in some variants, a couple of extra people, go at it with X-Wings and TIE fighters and things like that. It is a very fun game that you can put a lot of thought into in terms of preparing your force and the tactics you use to try to take out the opposing ships during a game. And it really does feel like those like Star Wars dogfights. Like you put your little pilot in there and you can give it little upgrades and everything. And it's a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun in the years over the years playing it, put a lot of money into it. Haven't played it recently because you really do have to commit to it. It's one of those lifestyle games that, like, if you're playing this, that's probably all you're playing. But at some point, I'm not getting rid of it for a reason. At some point, I'm definitely going to want to break it out again. So that's number 10. Coincidentally, the number 9 is the other sort of strategic tactical game that I have. This is one that I have played recently and plan on playing in the near future. That is the Funkoverse strategy game that I've played quite a bit with my wife, and she's beaten my butt a whole bunch of times. I have pretty much everything that they've released for it, aside from The Nightmare Before Christmas. If you're not familiar with this, it is a tabletop strategy game. You have little minis, and they're on the table fighting each other. But there are these little tiny Funkos. Actually, let me open it up and show you. Here's Harry Potter and the Joker, you can see, and the Kool-Aid Man. So that gives you an idea of what the game is like. It is characters from all these different intellectual properties teaming up to fight each other, whether capturing the flag or just trying to knock each other out, controlling territories and things like that. You can give them little upgrades. One can be, holding a wand. Another can be riding on the skateboard from Back to the Future. You can mix and match all this stuff. So that's always been a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see what future IPs they come out for that game. I'm hoping for Marvel someday, although the fact that they have DC tells me that's probably not going to happen. Lord of the Rings would be awesome. I was really hoping for Game of Thrones, and that did happen. So I have a feeling that if I put it out there, some of these might come in the future. So that's number 9, the Funkoverse strategy game. Number 8 is going to be one of the smallest games on the list. I do play a lot of small games, especially small 2-player games. My wife and I, we play, most of the games I play is against her. There's a lot of good little 2-player card games like Jaipur and things like that. But I'm going to put Archaeology. Archaeology is a small little, basically just a card game where you are delving through the ruins of probably Egypt, I'm going to guess. And you're trying to get little bits of clay pots and pharaoh's masks and things like that to eventually donate to the museum. I'm going to say, hopefully not sell. I'm going to say donate. That's bad enough. But anyway, it's a fun game. There's a little bit of random chance in it, but it's pretty quick. It's pretty easy. It's nice and thematic. And so we've played that many times and enjoyed it. So that is the number 8, Archaeology. Number 7 is the first, and one of the first big games, maybe the biggest game, aside from my number 1. This is a Wasteland Express delivery service coming in at number 7. This is a game that I think might be the first game my wife ever bought for me, kind of on a whim, and knocked it out of the park. This is a big pick up and deliver game. You can sort of see a little bit here. Imagine a post-apocalyptic, like, destroyed area, and there's little outposts, and they need things delivered. And so you're one of the people with a vehicle that's driving around to deliver weapons and food and water and things like that. You're upgrading your car like in Mad Max and maybe fighting a little bit, getting radioactive, and just trying to do these little delivery missions and accomplish your objectives before the opposing side. We've played it a bunch of times, although not recently. We need to play it again soon. But it's a very fun game. It infuriates me that it apparently wasn't more popular, because this is the exact sort of game that would benefit from expansions, and so far it hasn't gotten like an official one, and I think there's a lot that they could do there in this like Mad Max type world. But anyway, Wasteland Express Delivery Service is an awesome game. It's a little bit heavier than some of these other games I've talked about, but it's very much worth it. Takes a little bit to set up too, but it also has like the best organization system in the box out of almost any game I can think of. So that's number 7, Wasteland Express Delivery Service. My number 6 is over here, and this is going to be Clank, a deck building game. This is a game, getting a lot of glare there, so you can see an adventuring party that's going into this underground area, and they're attempting to steal stuff before this dragon wakes up and drives them all off. It's a deck building game, so you start off the game with this tiny little deck, and as you play, you buy new cards to add into your deck, and as you go through your deck, you're using these new, more powerful cards to venture deeper into the dungeon, to defeat monsters, to buy even more powerful cards, so that you can grab an artifact and then get back out of there before you get knocked out, and hopefully get more points than the other people in there. We've played this one a bunch. We're now playing, I've got down here, Clank Legacy, which is a version of Clank where every time you play it, the game changes for the next time. Your deck might be a little bit different, the board might be a little bit different. It's very fun, but for the purpose of this list, I'm just going to say Clank. We really like deck building games, and this is a particularly good one. Not super complicated. People who are super new to board games might not want to jump immediately into this, but after they've played 1 or 2 games, something like a Splendor and a Zool, this is a good next step game, I think, in Clank. They also have a sci-fi version, Clank in Outer Space. So that is my number 6. Number 5 is here, and this one, the box is not going to lure you in on this. You're just going to have to take my word for it, but my number 5 is Istanbul. It's one of my wife's top 3. Maybe I should rank it a little bit higher. But Istanbul is an awesome game with 2 cool expansions that all fit in this little box. So basically what Istanbul is you are in Istanbul back in, the medieval period, or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, and you're a merchant that's going to be wandering around this little city made out of these tiles, collecting different sorts of resources, delivering them, trying to patch up your wheelbarrow, which for some reason has a bunch of holes in it, praying at different mosques and things like that, all in the pursuit of these different rubies. And the first person to, I think, something like 6 rubies wins. But the thing about this game that's good, that sounds like a bunch of different board games, but this is a very tight game. You're making these little discrete choices. Which tile you're going to go to. And generally, when you go to it, it's going to block off other people because it costs more money to go there. They're not going to want to pay that. So you going to a spot also means that the next person can't. So you don't want to be late to a spot. You got to go there now, but you want to go everywhere because every space is good to go to. And for some reason with this game, it almost always ends up that the person who wins, the other person could have won if they just had one more turn. It's a very tight game, very tight decisions. The expansions are awesome. It's not even a very expensive game, by the way. So Istanbul, if you're looking for, again, one of those next step games, it's just a very clean classic, like of this sort of Euro resource gathering sort of game. This is probably always going to be one of my favorites, actually. And so that is the first of the top 5, Istanbul. Number 4 is another deck builder, and that is The Quest for El Dorado. This is one we've played many times, and I love this game. So imagine you are an expeditionary party that's going into the jungle and trying to get through to find the mythical city of El Dorado. And the way that you do that is you're going to have these little hexagonal areas of different types of terrain, maybe little villages or forests or water or mountains. And it's a deck building game. So you have cards that let you traverse different types of terrain, but they're really like weak. They don't let you go very far in one move. They don't let you go through really thick forest or like really deep water, I guess. I don't know why maybe it's rapids or something. But you can buy better versions of those cards. And you have these little meeples that are moving around, and they importantly block other players from moving through an area. So you can be a real dick and block off passages between two mountains. But anyway, it's another one of these really tight games. It's a race. You're trying to upgrade your deck while also moving as far and as fast as you can so you can get to El Dorado before they do. There's an expansion for this. It's also quite good. Again, not a very expensive game. I think they're coming out with a new version of it. They might have already. If not, it's coming out this year with a slightly different art style, but a very good game. I really recommend this one. Love teaching this to new people. That's my number 4, The Quest for El Dorado. At number 3, we have one of the newest games on the list for me. I think it might be the newest, maybe tied with Funkoverse. I'm not entirely sure. But number 3 is The Quacks of Quedlinburg, which up until recently was like my wife and I's game of the pandemic. It's a game we played a bunch. This is a game where you are quacks. You are people who are putting together potions back during medieval period, Renaissance, something like that. Importantly, your potions don't actually do anything, but you do want to make them look really impressive and make them smoke and bubble and interesting colors and stuff like that. And the way that you play the game is in the way that these are deck builders. Quacks of Quedlinburg is a bag builder. You're going to have a bag, and you're going to put these little tokens that represent different ingredients into it. And each round of the game, you're going to be pulling those out, hoping to get ingredients that are going to give you a lot of points before you pull out too many of the one type of ingredient that cause the entire thing to explode. And that gives it a great risk and reward sort of feel. You want to pull out as much as you can, but you don't want to explode because then you're not going to get any points. And over the course of the game, you get to put so much stuff in your bag. It starts off as this tiny little thing with just a few things jangling around in it. But by the end, like, it is just full of different things for you to pull out. And if you've made bad decisions, then it's going to be a hot mess that you're pulling out of there, but that makes it a lot of fun. And for whatever reason, out of all of these games, and a lot of these have tactical considerations and strategic concerns, this one never feels like you can just relax. You just relax. It'll be fun. Just pull stuff out and see what happens. And then maybe you throw a spider in there or something, or a mushroom. I don't know. Maybe you put a pumpkin in there, whatever. But it's always fun. And it's never too tense. Like, this is a good game to just relax. Maybe have a movie on or something like that. Quacks of Quedlinburg, my number 3. My number 2 is going to be, I guess, the highest ranked of these economic games. This is an engine builder game, and I guess it's my favorite engine builder game. That is Terraforming Mars. Very popular game by Jacob Frixelius. This is a game where you are terraforming Mars. Shocking, I know. You are one of multiple corporations that over the course of a couple of hundred years are going to try to make Mars habitable for other people. And the way that that works is you are going to be accruing money and steel and titanium and plants and energy and heat, and you're going to blast it into Mars by building mines and cities and trying to get moss and trees and plants and pets, even penguins. You're trying to put down oceans and build up forests, and basically you start off with this barren Mars, and you start off with basically nothing. But as you build up more and more of your own industry, you're going to be able to do more and more to Mars to make it habitable. And by the end of the game, you feel like a behemoth, and Mars, as a direct result of your efforts and the efforts of the other players, is this totally built up place with cities and oceans and all of that. And it's awesome. It's awesome. There's a bunch of different strategies you can take. There's a bunch of different expansions for this. I haven't even played all of them. There's like two expansions I haven't played, but there's ones that let you colonize Venus, go out to the outer asteroids, one that sets up a government on Mars that has little political machinations going back and forth. It's a lot of fun. It's a very expandable game, a very popular game with an awesome online implementation as well. Number 2, Terraforming Mars. I've played this a lot during the pandemic. And there's a case to be made that it could be my number 1, but I chose a different one because there's something about this game. It's a huge game in terms of how many expansions have come out. There's like 9 expansions or something like that. It takes up 2 big, full, heavy boxes in my collection that if someone were to break into my house, I could probably bludgeon them to death with just the expansion box. But it's always fun. It is my favorite, it's my favorite co-op game. It's my favorite sort of story game where you're playing and you're making decisions, but you're mostly just playing to see what happens and what story happens. That is Eldritch Horror, which I know a lot of hardcore gamers look down on now, that it's a little bit old and it's very lucky and random and stuff like that. But it's just so much fun. I love this sort of story. That's why I was so excited for Lovecraft Country, which came out this last year. And this is like playing a world-trotting version of that. You and, 1 to 6 other people are going to be going around 1920s Earth, visiting different cities, investigating different mysteries, fighting monsters and closing gates and dealing with cults and perhaps finding artifacts. And you're going to be going up against this elder god and all of their different monsters that they deploy around the world. And through the course of it, you might get cursed and become paranoid, but also find the Necronomicon and an ancient sword. And then you get some professor who's going to follow you around, but then you get corrupted and it turns into infection and then you die. Usually you die, or you go insane. But the game continues, and you can still play afterward, and it's just a lot of fun to see what happens to your character. The last time I played, which was this last Saturday, I was Norman Withers, I think was my name. I was an astronomer who believed that I could figure out what was going on with the Elder Gods mathematically. And by the end of the game, after some really rough times, and poor Norman Withers almost died at one point there. He was down to just 1 health and 1 sanity, and if either of those hit 0, you die. He eventually found an alien lightning gun and these ancient scepters that made him a god in both fighting and magic casting. He had upgraded himself in terms of training his strength and his mind and his will and all of that. He was effectively a demigod, this astronomer. And I knew he had it in him from the very beginning. People doubted him, but he knew it was going to happen. Anyway, that can happen. Or, alternatively, my friend Hal, he was playing a handyman. The handyman was doing work around the world, going around, killing monsters, closing gates. And then I think he went insane, like right before we won. But we're always going to remember that, because he was a boss up until he went insane. But anyway, there's a lot of expansions. You can get a lot of extra content for this. New monsters to fight, new items to get, new spells to cast, new elder gods to go against, new sideboards. Like, you play the world, but if you'd like, you can have an area that zooms in on Antarctica, or on the Dreamlands, or on Egypt, or God only knows. You can fight against a massive miles-long worm that's literally destroying cities. Like, they're no longer on the board. They don't exist anymore. And there's no other game that just has that. It takes a couple of hours. It's a little bit complicated, not in terms of the rules, but the setup. But it's just so much. Every game produces a story. Even if you lose, and you're probably going to lose, you're going to have fun doing it. And that, for me, is what board games are all about. And so I don't play it in the physical version as much as I would like anymore, what with the pandemic and everything. But there's an online version that I play. It's a lot of fun. I don't think I'm ever going to get sick of it. I feel like if I was going to, it would have happened by now. So my number 1 board game of all time, as of right now, Eldritch Horror. But all these top 10 are awesome, let alone the others. I mean, there's so many games here. They're all, like, this game survived. I love this game. This is one of the first board games I bought. I love it. It's so fun. I've had fun with a lot of these. Dead of Winter's pretty cool. My wife loves Outer Rim. I love it too, but for me, it's similar to Wasteland Express, and I feel like I only need one of the 2 on the top 10 list. But they're all awesome. So many good games. You can't even see down below. There's a lot of other games down there. You don't even know they're there. But anyway, I love it when all of you ask me questions like about, what game you should get, what game for your parents, what game for your kids, those sorts of things. I love talking board games, and so I was very glad to get requests to make this video. Hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you for both watching this video and also for supporting the network and having access to it in the first place. So, excited to find out what top 10s you'd like to see in the future. You can always send those to us on the team, the community tab on the YouTube channel, by tweeting me and things like that, or by leaving comments or super chats during the show. So until the next time, thank you for watching. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.